What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plaisance Podcast. It is time to do another draft profile review. This time, we're going to be talking about Spencer Fano. If you're curious about more draft profiles, I'm going to be flooding my YouTube page with those over the coming weeks. I want to get into some mock drafts, but I need to go ahead and get these analysis or all of these analyses out there because this is where I thrive as a content creator. Pumping out these draft previews is one of my favorite things to do all year long. I've already scouted over 100 players. I've just got to transfer all of my notes into like an actual readable Google Doc. And then, of course, get that into like a slideshow for you so that I can post it on YouTube and social media as well. But let's go ahead and get started. This is one of the more prototypical tackles in this draft. Now, when I talk about prototypical tackle, I think a lot of people think of like Trent Williams and Lane Johnson, but that is no longer the case in the modern day NFL. Penei Sewell is what we're looking at. He is more lean than some of these big guys. Think of Tyron Smith for the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, he played for the Philadelphia Eagles for a couple of seasons, but those guys are no longer the meta offensive tackle going forward into the future of this league, just because a lot of offenses run things that require more athleticism from the tackle position. It's not just a drop set, kick back, or kick slide type position anymore. You've got to be able to pull. You must be able to seal. And not to mention, you also have to just be a little lighter on your feet because these edge rushers are not Mean Joe Green. They are so much faster. They're just as strong, but you've got to have better positioning and footwork. So Fano is absolutely the next prototypical or future prototypical tackle in the league. So let's talk about some of his strengths. For starters, he gets a ton of movement. For a guy in the class, it's going to be in probably the bottom fourth of weight in terms of tackles. He is an absolute bulldozer on crackdown blocks. He packs a serious punch. Honestly, I'm going to talk about this in my critiques, but he kind of plays the game like a guard. I mean, he doesn't throw his head into the play, but usually what you see from a tackle is a strong, extended punch with their arm length, but he kind of plays a little close to the chest, maybe a little too close for some people's eyes, but when you look at his game whole faceted, you see that this strategy has worked for the majority of his college career. Where it hasn't is kind of where I'm going to talk about in his weakness and maybe something that he needs to refine. But in terms of actual momentum gained, his body perfectly moves on a crackdown, a pull, a sweep type play where he has been put in space. Now, his pass protection has a mixture of a smooth kick slide with a heavy anchor. Like I said, he's one of the lighter guys in this draft class, but he's got a great pair of feet under him. He obviously knows how to use them. I love the way he's able to, master the ability to kind of play defense, almost like a basketball 3 or 4 on the wing. He's got his feet and he's able to go just as quickly forward as he does backwards, which is an unbelievable trait to have as an offensive tackle. That's what a lot of GMs and scouts are looking for in the modern day offensive tackle. Can you accelerate and also backpedal pretty much at the same pace? And the answer to that question for Fano is absolutely. He finishes every block. This is the head coach type stuff that you want to see. Does he play till the end of the whistle? Absolutely. If he was allowed to, he would take every single defender that he was blocking and block them straight out of bounds on every single play. Now, his high-powered athletic ability allows him to get that first step quickly. Unlike some other offensive tackles in this class, I think it provides kind of like a pivot foot in terms of basketball post work. It's not necessarily the one that just generates the most torque, but it allows him to get the angles. If Pythagorean theorem was an offensive tackle, it would be Fano. He's unbelievable at getting to the spot and using that to his advantage to create leverage. It's not about arm length for him. It's about footwork and positioning. Those are his strengths. Now let's move in and talk about the weaknesses a little bit. He doesn't really have refined handwork, in my opinion. Didn't really. Okay, so one of the main critiques of him, there are several big ones, but one of the main ones is that he really didn't go up against premier edge rush work throughout the majority of his college career. I think the best film that you can find out of any game that he played was against Texas Tech. Now, that is a stacked front seven, but that's exactly what you're going to experience in the NFL. There were a couple of highlight plays. He had a sweep block versus David Bailey where he just basically grabs a hold of him and completely takes him out of the play. David Bailey, though, is a speed rusher. He's not going to be a run stopper throughout his NFL career. So I look at two different plays here to talk about the two major critiques. Number one, his play down the field versus Texas Tech there. Utah, I believe in the second quarter, had an absolute nuke thrown down the field. Miscommunication. He just slips up and gets to the second level. Flag on the play, illegal man downfield. That doesn't really have anything to do with the main critiques. I just thought Texas Tech kind of got in his head throughout the entire day, and he just quite frankly didn't have the greatest game in the world, especially when you're considering taking this guy in the top 10, top 15. But holistically, the two major critiques is his handwork and his size. His size is pretty slim if you compare him to some of the other tackles in this draft. I've talked about it multiple times here, but if you want to see that on tape, go find the 4th and 1 push kind of play versus Texas Tech. He is actually lined up on the left side of the ball, not where he traditionally plays at right tackle, but he goes one-on-one with Skylar Gill-Howard, defensive tackle for Texas Tech, an NFL draft prospect in and of himself, and he just does not get any push whatsoever, and it actually ends up blowing up the play, costing Utah yet another opportunity to score. I believe the play was close to the 50-yard line, so Texas Tech flips the field. You know, in the NFL, that turns into points no matter what. The second that you're on the other side of the 50, there's a lot of kickers that can kick from the 40-yard line. So that being said, those are the major critiques here. Like I said earlier, he plays like a guard. He keeps his arms a little closer to the chest. I kind of get the Will Campbell vibe from him. Now, if you think I'm being critical, I'm really not. I graded Will Campbell an 8.1 out of 10 last year. I was very high on his game. Did not have a good postseason and was injured during the regular season. So I think you're going to have to see more from him before we actually get a good review on him. But maybe shorter arms. I guess we'll see when the combine comes around. But his pad level gets a little too high. At times, the most common counter move against speed rushers was a dip rush, where they just take their shoulder, basically try to make it parallel to the ground and get under him. And it was pretty successful, especially during that Texas Tech game. There were a lot of plays where you saw his arms hook around defenders that got around him. That is not great technique. I think any offensive line coach would tell you that. There's not a ton of tape of him going up against bigger or stronger defenders in isolation. I would need to see more of that. I can't remember whether or not he participated in the Senior Bowl, but I don't really put a lot of stock into the Senior Bowl or the Combine. Can he do this, though, without adding weight? Because adding weight is probably going to take away from his athletic ability. That's kind of what makes him so valuable right now. Now, he fires off the ball in pass protection too quickly. He creates this is his probably most common critique out of most draft analysts. He fires off the ball in that right tackle split. And if you're looking at the guard versus the tackle, backpedaling into the pocket, so you've got the C created in one side of the pocket, there is a massive gap between the guard and the tackle. We've seen multiple teams exploit that throughout Utah's season. Now, he makes up for this a ton with his actual pass pro ability. The weaknesses here are kind of just little holes that aren't glaring differences that will make or break his career. These are things that he can absolutely correct. This has to do with technique, practice, reps. He's going to get that in the NFL. So holistically, I think his hyper athletic and diverse resume and being, multi-positional makes him more valuable than any tackle who is an elite edge rusher protector these days, strictly because tackles in a lot of these offenses, Ben Johnson's offense, any Kyle Shanahan West Coast offense, that's what they're asked to do. They're asked to have a diverse portfolio, especially at the right tackle position where Fano has thrived so far in college football. The college football ranks, really focus on that speed and fast, hyper athletic ability. He is definitely a product of that. I think he'll excel on a roster that decides to really hone in on those features rather than go somewhere like in this last bullet point here, go to a drop back or a heavy inside zone run team. I think when we're talking about Francis Mauigoa, the tackle for Miami, he would be much better suited for that than Fano would. So, he is kind of scheme dependent, but I do think he has a wide variety on his resume that would allow him to at least get on the field in multiple different teams in multiple different facets as well. So that's what I think makes Fano so valuable. So let's talk about the grade in comparison. 2026 NFL draft ranking scale is the exact same as my one from last year. 1 through 3 is a practice squad player. 3 through 5 is a rotational player. 5 through 7 is a 3+ year starter. 7 through 9 is Pro Bowl caliber. 9 through 10, Hall of Fame. Fano, of course, does not strike me as a Hall of Fame caliber player. Can he make the Hall of Fame? Absolutely. But I give him a 6.2 out of 10 here. My comparison is Paris Johnson Jr. If you go back and look at some of the draft profiles that people did on Paris Johnson Jr., it was the exact same comparisons here. Hyper athletic, can be diversified throughout the line of scrimmage. Pretty good pass set, footwork. Those are off the charts, but hand placement and or physical nature in terms of size are question marks. And that's kind of how Johnson's career has gone throughout his NFL tenure with the Arizona Cardinals. So Fano in that exact same conversation here. I definitely think he could be a valuable asset to a, let me see here, try to throw out some team names for you. The Chargers obviously do not need help at the tackle position. They have Joe Alt and they have Rashawn Slater, but that's a kind of offense that I definitely think the Mike McDaniel offense would thrive with a player like Fano. Miami Dolphins could use him for sure. The Minnesota Vikings can always use more depth at the tackle position. Is he a surefire top 15 pick? I definitely don't think so, but I would not be surprised at all to see a team take him in the top 15. That's going to do it for this draft profile review. If you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't like it, leave a comment. But overall, please subscribe to support the channel. I really love doing these. I'm going to be dropping a ton more content later this week, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Okay, once again, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.